Good morning and welcome to the Research 101 series. My name is Enrica Ziller, Research Education Programs and Outreach Manager in the Office of Research at the University of Texas at Dallas. As we move through today's session, I invite you to post questions into the chat for our guest speaker to discuss. Here to present principal investigators and faculty sponsors is Amanda Boone, Director of the Institutional Review Board at UT Dallas. Joining her are our IRB specialists, Mary Beth Goodnight and Yessenia Mendez. IRB team, welcome.
Thank you, Enrica. Today we're going to take a scenic drive down the IRB interstate as we talk about the PI and faculty sponsor of IRB studies, and just give a little bit of information on roles, responsibilities, and all that fun stuff. So I guess I will go ahead and get started. So first, let's talk about, before we get into roles and responsibility, what exactly is the principal investigator, which seems pretty basic. But the principal investigator is really the primary individual who is responsible for the study. So that would be the design, the conduct of the study as it's going forth, and also the one that is responsible for compliance, whether that be with the IRB regulations if you're using human subjects. That would be grantor rules and policies and all of that stuff if you have funding, and you know, other university policies, other federal regulations that apply as well. So if they're conflict of interest and all of that fun stuff, all of that is the responsibility of the PI, the principal investigator. So we'll break this up into a little bit just as we go through the responsibilities of how it kind of divides into the project. So first is just the science, of course. The PI is really responsible for making sure that the science is sound. And when we're talking about IRB and human subjects, it's just really important, and the IRB is going to look at this. They don't really look at the science per se, but they do look at it as far as, does it make sense to have human participants coming in and doing these activities. And so that's why why they're going to look at the science as well. So is something actually going to come about that's going to result in publications, all of that stuff that will then go back and benefit society. So just want to really make sure that the science is sound, that it is well organized, and all of that. Also, making sure that the lab has adequate resources so that you can carry out that project. That would be personnel, of course, but it's also just the stuff in the lab. Do you have what you have in your lab to make sure that you can actually do the study as it is approved, as it is written, all of those things. Excuse me. And also just to make sure that the study is conducted per the IRB approved protocol, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, many times today. Another of the PI responsibilities is just the conduct of the study. And the main component of that is education of the study personnel. So everybody that is listed on that study, their actions will reflect on the principal investigator, and the principal investigator is actually responsible for what happens underneath this project. So it's really important that that all personnel on the study have the appropriate knowledge, and that be the professional knowledge, the science, and how to conduct the science itself, the methods that are involved, as well as just the ethical conduct of the research. And like I said earlier, that goes well beyond IRB and how to protect participants, but it's everything. It's conflict of interest, the lab safety if you're working with biospecimens as well. It's every single component of that administration here at UT Dallas that you have come to love. All of that knowledge is also needed as well. I can tell you, we had an instance where a graduate student was working on a study. The principal investigator contacted me and said, this grad student on my study, it was a funded study, a federally funded study. that they were using software, and they had free use of the software for this study. And somebody from the software company contacted the graduate student and said, "Hey, would you just write up something and let us know that you appreciate the software?" The grad student said, "Yeah, that's fine. I'll do that because I actually like the software, and I'm not saying anything that I wouldn't normally say." That went into the company, and it was kind of broadcast. It was through social media. It was on their website. It was just about anywhere you could. This testimonial, and they slapped UTD researcher on that as well. So there are some things that don't seem like a big deal, and that one we were able to manage fairly quickly, and it didn't turn out to be a big deal, but it can really kind of escalate before you know it, where you think you're not doing something and then you've violated conflict of interest, or you've done other things that maybe you shouldn't have done. So it's just really important to make sure that those individuals who are working on your study do understand all of that stuff. And then the IRB protocols. And one thing I'll say before I go to the IRB protocols is just not only is it important that they understand what is required, the ethical conduct and all of that stuff, and also the IRB approved protocols, it's important that you continue to check in, that you continue to monitor. And the education isn't just a one-time deal where I kind of give them information and then we're done. You want to keep checking back. I could tell you so many stories about study personnel who have done some things that the PI would never have allowed in their lab, because the PI is actually really conscientious and stuff happens. So it's important to just keep on top and continue to monitor, refresh their knowledge and all of that stuff, and continue to have those conversations. And then the IRB approved protocols, of course, just what is approved, what is the most recently approved version, and make sure that they understand that they have access to those records so that they can pull up the most recently approved consent form, so they understand which one they should be using. Or maybe a modification went through to change up the flyer a little, and they didn't know, and they were using an old flyer. Or maybe you had talked about modifying the flyer, but you hadn't gotten IRB approval for it yet, and they thought maybe you had, and so they started using the new flyer before you had that approval. So there's a whole lot of things that can happen there. So just make sure that they understand what is actually approved and how to conduct that study. Of course, they should notify the IRB. Of course, always please be in contact with the IRB and communicate with us, especially if you are the principal investigator and you're not going to be available for whatever reason. Whether you're going on sabbatical, you're retiring, maybe you're going on an extended vacation for several weeks, and you don't really have access to communicate with those individuals. And it's not just, maybe I can communicate virtually. I'm available for email. They could call me. It's really having boots on the ground and being able to be available should anything happen on campus that you can quickly help them resolve if that study is going on in your absence. It might be good to notify the IRB just so that we have that knowledge, and maybe we need to help you set up somebody to take over for just the interim. There's also, of course, the protection of participants, which I would say is very important as an IRB person. And it really is the design of the study, as when you're talking about the protection. How are you designing the study? Understanding everything about your study. For instance, the study population. Different populations that you work with will have different risks associated with them. So it's just really important to understand who it is that you're going to be bringing into the lab and what unique circumstances might relate to these individuals. Whether you're working with prisoners or survivors of domestic violence, or a toddler versus a 13-year-old. There's just different considerations that come into play. So just really understanding your population and anticipating, the risks that are involved. What type of undue influence might actually pop up? These types of things, and having a plan in place to mitigate those risks as well. The informed consent process is one of the most important aspects of human subjects research, could be argued, just so that the participant understands exactly what they're going to be doing, what they're asked to be doing. So that informed consent process is really important, and it's really important for the principal investigator not only to have an excellent plan in place, but actually make sure that it is being realized and it's being practiced. I can tell you I've actually been on a post-monitoring check where I went into the lab and there were study personnel. The PI wasn't present, but the study personnel were kind of walking around in that space that I was in. A participant comes in, one of the personnel hands the participant a consent form and then walks away and says, "Sign it, I'll be back in a minute." So it's just really important to know if this is happening in your lab, if you're the PI, and make sure that that informed consent process is really happening in a way it should. That the environment is conducive to a conversation and all of those things. So you can really, really make that determination whether the participant understands what they are about to do. And that all goes into the monitoring, which we kind of talked about. Just make sure that it is consistent. And so every single person that comes into the lab, every participant is experiencing pretty much the same thing. They're going through the same activities. They're in the same manner. It's all consistent. And then reportable events. Stuff happens. If you need to report something, it really needs to be reported as soon as you find out. You find out that something happened, give our office a call and we'll work with you. That type of thing. The PI really is kind of the front line. Before any study personnel contacts the IRB office, I would hope that they would contact the PI and let the PI know what's going on. So the PI can kind of be that first determinant of how do we move forward and what do we need to do. So if something happens that needs to be reported to us, or if there's something that you're just not sure, I'm not sure if I need to report it, or maybe I just need to document that it happened, and then kind of mention it in the renewal, the continuing review. How do I need to kind of proceed here with this kind of thing? And then, of course, data security is really important. How are you going to store the data, whether that be the paper or whether it be electronic? How is it stored? Who is accessing that data? And all of these things, making sure not only that it's clearly outlined in the protocol, but then that is actually realized in the live. I have seen documents that were stored in a folder that were actually available to the entire building. So that is problematic for several reasons. One of which is just for the accuracy of the data. So anybody in that building could have potentially gone into a folder by accident, manipulated some of the data by accident, deleted a file, done something, and then the data would be compromised. So it's just really important to know how the data is being stored and make sure that it's being protected appropriately. And then, of course, all of this needs to be outlined in the IRB protocol. Make sure that because the IRB cannot read your mind, and I know that principal investigators have this in their mind, and they know what they're going to do, but putting it down on paper sometimes is kind of gives them a little. That's where the kinks come in. So just make sure that you're able to verbalize it, write it down on paper, so that it can be understood by the reviewers that are looking at that study. And then, of course, compliance with the regulations, which is the fun part, I know. when an IRB application is submitted, if it is funded, especially if it's federally funded, but if it's got some a grant funded, a sponsored research funding attached to that, the first thing the IRB specialist is going to do is pull up that record, pull up that submission that was sent to the granting agency, and kind of do a side-by-side comparison to make sure that what the IRB is reviewing and what we're telling the government that we are doing with the study and what they've given us money to do, that has actually been approved by the IRB, or that is, we are doing what we said that we were doing in that application. So the first thing that they do is they side by side, they take a look at the grant application, the IRB application, and if changes need to be made, they'll contact, or if they have questions, they'll contact the principal investigator. So it's really important to do that. I have had some investigators who indicate, yeah, that grant was funded. It's my study. Here's the IRB number. It's already been approved. And they give the IRB number. We take a look at it, and it's actually really different. The PI's intention was to go ahead and do a modification. However, they hadn't done that yet. The grant had been funded. It had been funded with the understanding that IRB approval had already been obtained. So this is where we run into problems. Please don't do that. Make sure that you have your approval before you have your approval, and the approval expectations are in line with what the granting agency expects. We want to make sure, hopefully, yes, please, that the IRB submissions are submitted to our office in a timely manner. That would be the initial applications. Please do this before you do any stuff, before you do any research activities, before you start recruiting participants, before you're doing any of the activities, definitely. You do not want to get into a position where you are applying for a grant, you're applying for, you send in a publication to a journal, and that journal says, hey, great, we want to publish this, but I need a copy of your IRB approval. We have actually had investigators who have come to us saying, this journal says I need IRB approval. Can you look at the study after the fact? And so you're putting yourself in a position where you can potentially need to scrap all of the data, all of that hard work that you put into that publication, and start from scratch. Because using human subjects data, collecting that without IRB approval is really problematic, and journals don't want to publish it, and granting agencies certainly don't want to fund it. So please do it before you do any of that work. Modifications need to be submitted before you actually enact those changes. So, and even the smallest changes, I want to add somebody to a study. I want to change wording in the flyer. I need to change out CLIN card for Galaxy Pay, which is one of the fun ones these days. Those need to be submitted through a modification to our office through Cayuse. And so please submit those in a timely manner. I have had some people submit renewals, indicate that certain personnel have been working on the study through the last year, but they haven't actually ever been added to the project. And so please make sure that as those changes are made, you're submitting those modifications to our office. And then renewals, continuing reviews, renewals. The thing about the expiration date on those for IRB approval is that it's not a suggestion, and it's not it's actually a hard stop. So when IRB approval stops, it ended. Let's say IRB approval ended on March the 4th. Today is March the 5th. So as of yesterday, I should have stopped all of my research activities, including data analysis. I cannot proceed further until I have that IRB approval put back into place and reestablished. Our policy now is, and we do have this on the books, that any study that has been expired for 30 days or longer, we will administratively close that study out. And that can cause investigators a lot of grief. So please, it's nothing that I take joy in doing. I don't want to administratively close out a study. But that is our current policy. So please, just know we'll start sending you out those reminders 30 and 45 days ahead of the expiration. Please just get those renewals and those renewals in and submitted well before that expiration date, so you will not run into any issues. Of course, the reportable events, we've kind of talked about that a little. As soon as you know that something has happened, please just let us know. And then those closures. If you have a study, it's closed out, you are no longer working on it, you're done with data analysis, everything, please send a final report and close that sucker out. Because we do have several that then IRB approval expires, and the PI just kind of lets it sit, and they go into that non-compliance, and they look and they appear like the PI is not in compliance because their IRB approval has expired, and it expired for more than 30 days. It looks so much better to actually officially close out a study, submit that final report, than have the IRB office need to then trigger an administrative closure because of non-compliance. Because that, yeah, especially if that's not the case, you're just done working on it. And here are the rules. Know the rules, here they are. For IRB, this is specific to IRB. There are a lot more rules when it's coming to research, but the Belmont report actually is not a rule per se, it's just guidance, and it is what the IRB regulations are actually based upon. So it's good to have knowledge of the Belmont report. The actual regulations, the federal regulations, the one that is most common to UTD research is the common rule, which is HHS 45 CFR 46, and this will this actually applies to probably 90% of 95% of UTD research. For those studies that do actual clinical trials, or they are doing efficacy or safety trials, those will be under the FDA rules, the 21 CFR 50 and 21 CFR 56. And there's a couple other FDA ones, one that does with medication, which we don't have a lot of, and then another one that does with medical devices, which we actually do some. And then of course we have UTD policies, which are fun, and the UTD IRB actually has a policy library, which is on our website. It was just published within the last several months. So I encourage you to just go on, take a look at that, and just be cognizant that the policies are there and available if you really want to check them out. So you might be asking, who actually qualifies to be a PI, a principal investigator of a study? And for the most part, it's going to be tenured or tenure track faculty members here at UT Dallas. It also would be clinical professors here at UT Dallas. And basically anybody else will need a faculty sponsor. We do allow visiting faculty, adjunct faculty, research scientists, and students or staff to be a principal investigator on a study. However, they would need a faculty sponsor to be able to do that. So we're talking about the faculty sponsor, and the faculty sponsor basically is somebody who is PI eligible at UT Dallas to serve in that role, and they agree to kind of work with an individual who is not eligible to be a principal investigator, and they take on they divide and they share the responsibility for the conduct of that study. And everything we talked about for the principal investigator, the faculty sponsor is taking on that as well. There are a few other ones, and I will say there's differences. So when we talked about who is eligible to be a principal investigator, it was faculty tenure and tenure tracked. There was also people who are not. So if there is a faculty member who is eligible here they since moved to the great state of Kansas for whatever reason. They want to keep their study open and running because they've got students on it. They would need a faculty sponsor to do so. However, that is very different from a faculty sponsor who is serving as like a staff member study or a student study. And I've kind of different slides for those two. So first one, we'll talk about the student. The faculty role in the student PI is really to ensure that, so the PI is to ensure that study personnel have all the knowledge, and the faculty sponsor is really there to mentor that student investigator and to make sure that the student investigator has the knowledge needed to then help pass that along to all of the folks on the study as well. And that goes back to the research methods and as well as the responsible conduct of research. That faculty sponsor should meet regularly with the PI to have those discussions, to really know what's going on with the study, be cognizant of it, have be in a discipline that understands the science behind it, so that they can kind of provide that mentorship to the student as well. And then just be available here on campus if something goes wrong, if a student is working with children and a child comes in and the student investigator has, some reason to believe that there might be some abuse going on with that child. What are they going to do? It's not something that you run into every day. I need to call my my faculty sponsor. So that faculty sponsor really needs to be available, be here to be able to, yeah, I'll be there in just a moment, so they can help them kind of move through whatever is going on should questions or issues pop up. Be that front line before they reach out to the IRB. They have that faculty sponsor that they can reach out to if needed, and then communicate with us, with the IRB office. If there are issues that come up, if the faculty sponsor is actually going to be on sabbatical for a while the study is taking place, let us know so that we can help with that. And then the faculty sponsor for unaffiliated faculty, and this is something that is not uncommon. We do have faculty that move to other institutions. They want to keep or they retire, or they their status changes for whatever reason, and they want to keep the study going here on campus while their students graduate. We also have individuals from other institutions who want to come and access our students. If they want to do that, they do need to come through our process and have some sort of faculty sponsor here. While that person might not be as intricately involved in the science of it, they still need to know the study. They need to know who's working on it, especially if people are here on campus working on this research study. I can't tell you, there have been times when we reach out to the faculty sponsor and the faculty sponsor basically says, I'm faculty sponsor in name only, I have no idea what's going on with the study. Well, as faculty sponsor, you really should, because your name is on it and you all have agreed to share the responsibility of the conduct of that study. So it is really important that you understand what it is that you're signing up for when you take on the role of faculty sponsor. So know the study, know what's going on with it, know who's working on it, that type of thing. Be available, especially if activities are happening here at UTD campus. Be available if anything happens, so that you can go meet up with, go there, or have a phone call. Be available to that PI, that principal investigator, should they need to do so. And then communicate with the IRB if the status changes. What I really want to avoid is we've had situations where the faculty sponsor, we're reaching out to the faculty sponsor because we can't contact the PI, and the faculty sponsor has said in the past, please take my name off of the study because I have nothing to do with it. Well, I really can't just take your name off of it. You are the faculty sponsor. So just be cognizant of that when you agree to take on that role. And that's really my presentation today. This is our office again. I'm the director, Amanda Boone, and then we have Beth Goodnight and Yessenia Mendez, who are specialists. So if any questions come up either about this presentation or about anything IRB related, please just reach out to us at any time. We're here. We also have if you're not sure who to contact, we do have a IRB email address, just irb@utdallas.edu, and somebody will respond to your inquiry.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Amanda, for sharing your time, talent, and resources with us today. And Mary Beth and Yessenia, I know you're backstage, so thank you for being here today. Audience, thank you for joining us. Thank you so much, and have a great afternoon, everyone.